During the COVID-19 outbreak, the pandemic, during the lockdowns, we saw all sorts of very interesting things happening in food markets and around food prices. And part of it was because people couldn't actually go and shop. So someone who does the shopping in the household, let's be honest, it's a woman, not someone who looks like us most of the time, and they would then spend Saturday morning, and you see it in towns around the country, going from supermarket to supermarket to supermarket, getting the best price in all of these things. We get the washing powder from there, we'll get the bread from here, we'll get the maize meal from there, and you basically take part in all of these loss leaders. And people weren't able to do that. So while food prices didn't go up dramatically, there was a lot of rain at the time, what people were paying for food went up. We also saw, because informal markets were closed, because hawkers weren't actually able to sell, that meant that people couldn't just go and buy, tomatoes on the way home. Yeah. So there's a whole source of food that disappeared from the way that people were able to buy. So I suppose the question is, an investigation like this, whether it comes across evidence of wrongdoing or not, will help explain the mechanism and what's driving food prices.
And definitely why bargain hunting, like you're alluding to, is not working at the moment for South Africans. Let's find out more about these unfair pricing methods with Kagiso Zwane, who's an economist at the Competition Commission. Kagiso, welcome to Newzroom.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Well, for consumers, Kagiso, who might not understand the term, rather, opportunistic pricing, what is that and how does it affect them?
Thank you for the question. I think when we use opportunistic pricing in this context, what we're referring to really is price increases that may not be justified by costs, by the cost increases which underlie them. And that really stems from a context where there is high inflation globally, including in key inputs for producing various food products. And when we say opportunistic pricing, we are concerned that the price increases on the shelves may be over and above those which explain the increases necessitated by the underlying costs.
When we look at the food price inflation, one of the segments that pushed up inflation to 7% was food inflation. Can we then find a correlation that the overpricing or the opportunistic pricing from some of these processors and also retailers actually pushed up the inflation rates in the country?
I don't think we can be that strong as yet. That is still something that we have to probe for further in terms of understanding the cost structures of the various firms that are involved in getting foods to our table, and that is part of our ongoing investigation. But we are concerned about the broader economic implications that the pricing behavior might have. I think, as many people would appreciate, South Africa's food markets are highly concentrated, and that confers onto retailers and indeed processors a degree of market power that allows them to raise prices above cost if they want to, and not really fear those price increases being competed away by new entry, etc. And that is our concern in concentrated markets, really, is that when price shocks occur in concentrated markets, there is this opportunity that powerful firms have to transfer higher costs, higher price increases than are justified by costs. But can we say for certain right now that inflation is being driven by these costs? I don't think so. But we can certainly keep the door open in terms of an investigation to better understand the mechanisms and whether it is indeed justified by cost or simply an exercise of market power under the guise of inflationary pressures.
But to be fair, Kagiso, to some of these producers, processors and retailers, they'll point to the fact that it's the economic factors and the producer prices like backup power and spending on fuel for trucks that deliver some of this food that is raising the prices. But in some cases, you found that the cost doesn't match the price that they're charging.
And they would be correct to point to that. I think the challenge is we never quite know where the price is going to land up. And that is why we continue to monitor these prices in the context of this current inflationary moment. So we are alive to the fact that fuel prices continue to rise, electricity prices continue to rise, and that those will have a knock-on effect on costs. But I think the message of the Commission has been quite clear in that, price increases should be justified by the underlying costs. And what we see in this report really could point to one of two things. is that there are opportunistic prices, but if you look at, say, the relationship between the maize price, the maize meal price, and the white maize price in SAFEX, we find that there's an increasing divergence between that upstream white maize price and the maize meal price. So it could also be, as you've alluded to, that these other cost categories that aren't the primary inputs are increasing by so much that the fundamental relationship between the primary inputs, in this case white maize from the farm, and the end product, maize meal, that relationship is now changing, with other cost items becoming a bigger contributor to the prices and to the cost pressures and ultimately prices which we pay as consumers.
This opportunistic pricing then is making life even more unbearable for South Africa's vulnerable households. So what is the Competition Commission doing in cases where it finds these overly inflated prices? I mean, in the cases of colluding and the such, you take 10% of the company's value. What happens in this particular case when you find retailers and processors? Do you have any teeth, my question is, to take them up and maybe fine them even?
Absolutely. So by way of example, I think most people would be aware of the Commission's enforcement action during the COVID-19 pandemic with respect to price gouging on sanitizer and face masks. And that did result in administrative penalties being paid by the companies who are guilty of price gouging under the regulations which were in place at the time. And in the ordinary course, there is an administrative penalty of up to 10% of revenue on any company that is found to have increased prices unfairly. And then with respect to collusion, if that is the concern and that is successfully prosecuted, then there is also in our law criminal liability for those directors or employees who are involved in colluding, because as competition practitioners we consider collusion, be it market fixing, price fixing, etc., as the most egregious act, and that is reflected in our law. So should any investigations, not just food price investigations, but any investigations yield those findings, then I think the Commission is very comfortable to use the law as it has been given to us.
No, you've already touched on the fact that the price of white maize at the market and the price that we're charged at the shelves is not really matching in terms of cost and pricing from retailers. Given the fact that this is a staple in the country, it's gone up by 32%. Red meat and chicken offals, which is gizzards and chicken feet, things that shouldn't be expensive, have also gone up. Are you finding that retailers and processors are taking advantage of these particular basic items? Because a lot of South African consumers are distressed at the moment, and those are the products that they're going for in their shops.
So based on publicly available data, which is what we use for this report, we are concerned about that widening spread in key products between the producer price or the factory gate price and the retail price. And the report does flag this in terms of bread as well and maize meal. And so this is a concern that retailers could be taking more margin than is otherwise justified. But interestingly, with respect to poultry, the report also touches on IQF, individually quick frozen chicken, commonly known as braai packs. And that appears to have really bucked the trend in terms of inflation and is not increasing at the same rates as general food inflation. Now, these particular products are incredibly important as a protein source for the poor. So while prices have been increasing in terms of the braai packs, the quick frozen chicken, it's not to the same extent as general food inflation. And we think that the role of imports might be contributing to the cushion that consumers of that particular product seem to be experiencing.
All right. Thank you very much. That was Kagiso Zwane, who's an economist at the Competition Commission.